This is the Week 17 test video, and here we go. So the very first problem you've got, we have 4x plus 18 equals negative 6. Step 1, go ahead and put that line, that reminder line down. Remember, the reminder line just tells us whatever I do on one side, I need to do on the other. Our first step, our first computation step is to cancel out the 18. So we're going to add a negative 18 to both sides. And what that negative 18 does is it makes this into a whole bunch of zero pairs, which means on this side the only thing left over is 4x. On this side we have 6 positives and 18 negatives. Now anytime you have positives and negatives, they cancel out. They don't combine to make more things, they cancel out. These 6 positives cancel out 6 of those negatives, and that leaves us with 12 negatives. Last step, go ahead and divide each side by 4. That 4 is the coefficient. It's the thing that makes this a big 1. 1 times x is x, and negative 12 divided by positive 4 is negative 3. Then we know before we step away from the problem, we need to check our work. We just want to make sure that we did the problem correctly. The check lets us do one last look at the problem before we turn it in, before we call the answer final. All right, so we have 4 times negative 3, that's negative 12. And we've talked about the fact that as you're doing the check, you're going to see these numbers pop up again. The negative 12 is that negative 12. Plus 18 is equal to 6. 12 negatives, 18 positives. There are 12 zero pairs here. So after those 12 negatives cancel out 12 of those positives, they leave 6. And we can feel confident with an answer of negative 3. Okay, on to problem number 2. So in problem number 2, we have Madison collecting Moshi monsters. And she collects 76 Moshi monsters. She put the same number of monsters into 6 bags and had 4 left over. How many monsters did she put in each bag? So we need a variable in this problem. And the variable x will be Moshi monsters per bag. If you didn't write down a variable, if you didn't define it, take your red pen and define it now. Go ahead and write in that. X equals Moshi monsters per bag. So we know that she put the same number of monsters into 6 bags and had 4 left over, which means she had 6 bags, each had the same number of monsters, plus 4 more monsters, the 4 left over, equals 76. Once we have this, we've got a problem just like we solved in number 1. Take a look over at number 1. We had a coefficient, a variable. We added some extra amount. We got an answer. So you're doing the same thing here. So step 1 is add a negative 4. We need to create a zero pair, and actually 4 zero pairs. So we create 4 zero pairs right here. When they cancel out, we have the 6x left. If you add negative 4 to positive 76, you get 72. Then we want to see, okay, how much do we have in one bag? We know that in 6 bags now there are 72 monsters. But our question is monsters per bag. So how many do we have in each bag? So we make our giant 1 here by dividing by the coefficient. 6x divided by 6 leaves us with x. 72 divided by 6 leaves us with 12. Let's see if that makes sense. Let's see if that answer works. So we are going to check our work. We're going to take the 6, we're going to multiply it by 12, add 4, and see if we get 76 as an answer. So the first thing I'm going to do is 12 times 6. 6 times 2 is 12, carry a 1. 6 times 1 is 6, and 1 more makes 72. We're on the right track. We've seen that 72 before. It was right there. All right, so then we're going to add the 4. I don't know why I wrote a 42 there. We're going to add the 4. And yes, 72 plus 4 equals 76. That works, and we can be confident that the number of monsters in each bag were 12. All right, make your corrections on that one. If you need to pause the video at any point to add some correction notes or go back and look at something, feel free to do that. You can replay a portion if you want to, and then you can move on to the next one. That's the advantage of having it in video. All right, on to problem number 2. So this is a rainbow problem. In a rainbow problem, we're going to multiply the 8 by both of these parts. Now, before we do that, I would recommend rewriting this problem as addition. That's not mandatory. If you want to solve it as a subtraction problem, you can. However, my experience has been that if students take the time to rewrite these as addition problems, they have fewer mistakes, fewer errors. All right, once we have this as an addition problem, we're going to multiply 8 times both those parts. So we're going to have 8 times x is 8x. We're going to have 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. And all of that is equal to negative 80. Now, before I go any further, let's go ahead and get that dashed line. Now I'm ready to actually start doing things on both sides. And my first thing on both sides is to add 32. I want to cancel that out. I want 32 zero pairs. If I do it on the left, I have to do it on the right also. On the left, 32 zero pairs, those cancel out. The only thing left is 8x. On the right, this is a negative 80. This is a positive 32. They're going to cancel out. They're not going to combine. They're going to cancel parts of each other out. So when we do that, we're going to have 80 negatives, 32 positives. When we get the difference, let's borrow from this. 10 minus 2 is 8. 7 minus 3 is 4. I had more negatives, so I've got negative 48. My final step is going to be to divide by that coefficient, divide by that 8. There's my big 1. And that's going to leave me x on this side. 48 divided by 8 is negative 6. All right, let's see if negative 6 makes sense. So let's go ahead, do the check. When we check this, we have 8 times negative 6 minus 4 equals negative 80. I'm going to change this to 8 times negative 6 plus negative 4 equals negative 80. Because I find it easier if I'm adding 2 negatives, that makes more sense to me. I have 6 negatives, add 4 more negatives, that gives me 10 negatives. And all of that equals negative 80. 8 times negative 10, that's negative 80. This is negative 80. That all looks great, and I can be confident with my answer of negative 6. All right, Mrs. Smith bought melons. She bought 4 boxes of melons. Each box has 2 watermelons and the same number of honeydew melons, same number as every other box. So if there were 24 melons in the 4 boxes, how many honeydew melons are there in each box? So my variable, my x, I'll put it up here so we have room to work. My x is honeydew in each box. So I know that there are 4 boxes of melons. In every box there are 2 watermelons plus some honeydew, altogether 24 melons. 2 times 4 is 8, so there are 8 watermelons altogether, plus 4x honeydew melons altogether, and that gives me 24 melons. All right. First thing I want to do is I want to take away the watermelon. So let's just take away the 8 watermelons. Now you'll notice I didn't do that as add a negative, because when you're working with word problems, quite frequently you aren't going to have negative numbers. And if you don't have negative numbers, then falling back on plain old subtraction works pretty well. It's when you're dealing with negatives that we really find, or more complex equations, we really find the adding the negative part helps. So when I do that, that zeroes out, no more watermelons, and I know that my 4 boxes of honeydew melons equal 16 melons altogether. I want to know how much I have in just one box, so I'm going to divide my 4 boxes by 4. That makes a big 1. Divide my 4 boxes by 4. I have got in each box 4 melons. I think I've got 4. Let me go and check that before I write my answer on the answer space. Let me check, see if I did it correctly. So if I had 4 boxes of melons, and every box had 2 watermelons and 4 honeydew melons, would I have 24 altogether? Well, in my 4 boxes, 2 watermelons each, that's 8 watermelons altogether. In my 4 boxes, 4 honeydew melons each, that's 16 honeydew melons altogether. And yes, 8 plus 16, that equals 24. And I can be confident with the fact that in each box there were 4 honeydew melons. All right, on to number 5. So in number 5, we have a straightforward one-step equation problem. Let's get our line down. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and just use subtraction. We could add the opposite if we wanted to. But again, as you get more experienced with this, you'll know when to use subtraction, when to use add the opposite. Here's subtracting. 27 take away 27. That all zeroes out. We're left with x. Over here, 43 take away 27. Well, we need to borrow from that and regroup. 13 take away 7 is 6. 3 take away 2 is 1. I think the answer is 16. Let's find out. Even on these simpler equations, we want to finish by doing a check. We want to put the value. We said x was 16, so we're going to put that where the x was in the original equation. Then we're going to take 27 and 16, add them together. 7 and 6 is 13, carry a 1. 1 and 2 makes 3, plus 1 more makes 4. That 43 matches that 43, and we can be confident with the fact that we got it right. Number 6, Mattias is driving M miles to his hometown in Chico. After traveling 45 miles, he sees a sign that says 85 miles to Chico. What's the total distance? Well, here's what we know. He's driving M miles altogether. After traveling 45, he sees a sign that says 85 miles to Chico. So we want to write an equation to see what the total distance of his drive is to Chico. What we know is that M is the total distance. He's already driven 45 miles, and the sign says there are 85 miles left. So here is our equation to solve. If you take the total distance, you subtract the 45 he's already driven, there are 85 miles to go. Well, we're going to add back in the 45 miles he's already driven to cancel that out. So if somebody said, what's the total? He said, well, I've already gone 45. If I add that back in plus the 85 I see, I'm going to get my total, which means that if I add a 45 there, need to add a 45 here. So M left on this side, 85 and 45, 5 and 5 is 0, carry the 1, 9 and 4 is 13, and we think he has to drive 130 miles. Let's see if that's true. Let's check that to see if that makes sense. If he drives 130 miles total and he's already gone 45, will he have 85 left? Well, 130 take away 45. I'm going to borrow from that. 10 minus 5 is 5. Got to borrow from that. 12 minus 4 is 8. That 85 matches that 85. And we can be comfortable with the fact that his total distance to Chico, 130 miles. To the back of the test. This is the longest test of the year for us here. To the back. All right. So these are the problems I said I personally always like to go ahead and get this where I have some space. We have x divided by 3. The opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So we're going to multiply by 3 on each side. I didn't put my line down, but you remember we have that. Do the same thing on both sides. You will know if you did this first part correctly, because if you did it correctly, these will cancel out to 1. And you'll be left with x. On this side, 14 times 3, 14 times 3, 3 times 4 is 12, carry a 1, 3 times 1 is 3, and 1 more makes 4, 42. To see if that's correct, to see does that work, we need to take the 42, divide it by the 3, and see if we get 14. So we'll just down here, we'll do this. 3 goes into 42 one time. 3 with 1 left over. 3 goes into, so we're going to have 12 here. And 3 goes into 12 4 times. And there is that 14, which means I can feel confident I did it correctly. And I know that x has a value of 42. All right, Paul bought 8 DVDs, $104 for the total of 8 DVDs. If each DVD costs the same amount of money, how much does one DVD cost? Well, we know that Paul had, excuse me, we know that Paul had 104 DVDs, or $104, excuse me, to buy 8 DVDs. So 104 divided by 8, 8 goes into 10 one time. 2 left over, bring down the 4. 8 goes into 24 3 times. I think $13 is what Paul paid. How can I check that? Well, I can check that by saying if I have 8 DVDs times $13 each, do I get $104? Let's see. 13 times 8. 8 times 3 is 24. Carry the 2. 8 times 1 is 8, and 2 makes 10. And I've got my 104, and I'm confident with my price of $13 per DVD. All right. We're coming to the end of the test. Big test, long test. All right, this is a rainbow problem. We're multiplying these together. I'm going to make my first step just a quick rewrite step. 22 plus 5 times 3x plus negative 4. The 22 doesn't change. 22 is not part of the rainbow at all. I'm going to have 5 times x and 5 times 3x. And 5 times negative 4. So 5 times 3x is 15x. Plus 5 times negative 4 is negative 20. When I look at what can be combined here, the things I can combine are the ones, the 22 and the negative 20. And when I do that combination, there's nothing to combine to the x. So I get 15x plus 22 positives, 20 negatives, 2 zero pairs, 2 left over, and I get 15x plus 2. Triangle problem. Here's the formula for the area of a triangle. You multiply the base times the height, and you divide by 2. So in this problem, you have the base and the height multiplied together, so 9 times 2x minus 4. I don't really need to make this into an addition problem. I could. I'll show it both ways. It's going to have the same answer. Here I have 9 times 2x is 18x, minus 9 times 4 is 36. Divide all that by 2. Well, 18x divided by 2 is 9x, minus 36 divided by 2 is 18. I get 9x minus 18. If I did decide to do it by making it add the negative or add the opposite, I'd have 2x plus negative 4. I'd have the same rainbows. I'd have 9 times 2x. I'd have 9 times negative 4. So I'd have 18x plus negative 36. I have to divide all that by 2. Remember, that's what happens. It all gets divided by 2. I'd have 18x divided by 2 is 9x, plus negative 36 divided by 2 is negative 18. So in either case, my final answer is 9x minus 18 or 9x plus negative 18. Those answers really mean the same thing. All right, down to the very bottom. Which equation and answer represents this scenario? Maria has $80 to spend. After she bought 4 shirts that all cost the same amount, I'm going to make X the shirts. So after she bought 4 shirts that all had the same amount, she has 18 left over, 18 remaining. How much did each shirt cost? So after she bought 4 shirts that all cost the same amount, so all these are the same, she had $18 left over. D is our correct answer. D is the situation that shows buying 4 shirts, having 18 left, all of that totaling $80. Okay, so you have the opportunity to go back, look over parts of this if you need to. And if you have questions, please let me know what those questions are.